Hello. Going to talk today about that Prince Andrew interview. Although I have to say, although I've made notes, it all feels kind of mushy and unstructured in my head, so I don't have a narrative structure for it. I'm just going to have to go through various things that have occurred to me or ideas that have occurred to me and see how it turns out, I think. First, though, a brief mention about the koala bear, which has been, or which some experts are saying appears to be functionally extinct in Australia now, believe it or not. They're still there, but because of the fires, the wildfires, which have destroyed about 80% of their natural habitat apparently, and killed about 1,000 of them in the wild, estimated, there are not enough koala bears left to form a viable population, it seems, and there's not enough eucalyptus leaves for them to eat either until they grow back, which will take a while. If they are to survive, apparently it's going to require human intervention. There have always been wildfires in Australia, of course, but this year it's been more than 10 times the normal amount in terms of land area. 900,000 square kilometres or something, compared with the usual 10 to 50,000 or so. And Australia, of course, the Australian government is still trying to invest in coal production. Anyway, Prince Andrew. I don't know if you've bothered to watch the interview. It's okay. Whilst watching it, I was like, okay, this is more or less what you'd expect him to say. It was really only when I went through it in my head afterwards that I saw just how absurd it really was. For those of you who don't know, it's all about Prince Andrew's links with Jeffrey Epstein, an American major paedophile who was not only abusing lots of underage people, but also running it as a blackmail operation, apparently, both on his own behalf and probably, if you look at the background of especially Ghislaine Maxwell, his girlfriend, on behalf of Mossad or the CIA or MI5 and all the rest of them, who are probably all the same organisation anyway, at bottom. That is collecting info on the perversions of the rich and famous and influential and using it to force them to do what you want, or to pay up money possibly, or to do what the secret services want them to do when the time comes. It's a way of controlling a society. You can take unknown people, get them to break the law in these appalling ways, film it, and promote them to positions of power. So you always have them, and the people who are in power are under your control. And you can corrupt people who are already in power the same way, because some of them are willing to be corrupted, right? Or to commit these crimes. But Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who it is generally agreed was pretty definitely a Mossad asset. During his lifetime, he became proprietor of the Daily Mirror Group, a newspaper group in Britain, and he robbed the pension fund there of something like £500 million, so that the employees of the Mirror Group who had worked there for decades suddenly had no pensions. to look forward to. When this began to come out, he died mysteriously, falling off his boat, or he was pushed, or committed suicide. Don't know. The Lady Ghislaine, that was called, that boat. But they apparently recovered his body or something, because something with the name Robert Maxwell was buried, I think in the Mount of Olives in Israel, or Golgotha or somewhere like that, and the head of the Secret Intelligence Service, Mossad, attended his funeral. Okay, after he'd robbed the Mirror Group. Yeah, right. So he must have done something right. But she, Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's accomplice and apparently his madam, procuring and distributing the children, and taking part in the abuse, of course was his daughter, one of his daughters. He has a couple of other daughters, who, among other things, invented search engines. They were responsible for, I think, Magellan, one of them, which was a precursor to, ultimately, Google, and invented also an email system which allows tracking of all your emails and even activation of your cameras and stuff on your computers, and which is used again as the basic engine, I think, within Hotmail and Gmail and most of the other big engines of today, and is used throughout the Pentagon and the US government. Very strange. All linking back to the secret services. Funny that, isn't it? So the interview, what it's all about is, of course, one of the victims, in fact several of the victims, something like 20 people I think have come forward now, but one of them, Virginia Roberts, or Virginia Roberts Guiffre or something as she's known now, because she got married, and this all happened a long time ago, mentioned that apart from Epstein and Maxwell abusing her, and various other celebrities and famous people, Prince Andrew was one of them. And at the time she says she was 17 years old, and he had sex with her in New York, in the US Virgin Islands, and in London. Now in London she would not have been underage, because the age limit here is 16. But in New York and the US Virgin Islands, I'm sure it would have been illegal. I think the age of consent varies across different US states, but for the most part 18 is what you're looking at. And so, obviously, this is a bit embarrassing. And obviously also, in the interview, he had received legal advice and was not able to say very much, to be honest. It came down to, oh, I don't remember the girl, although there's a photo of him with her. There were innuendos suggesting maybe it's faked. Some of his supporters claim it's faked. Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. It isn't obviously faked when you look at it. But I'm not in a position to tell. That would need expert analysis, I think. On the face of it, it looks genuine enough. And it's situated upstairs in Ghislaine Maxwell's house in London. Probably. Or somewhere that looks a lot like it. I don't think anybody's denying that that is where it is either. Of course, if they could find Ghislaine Maxwell, they may be able to find out for sure. Anyway, she's vanished. Yeah. And I don't know if anybody's chasing her. You would think they would, wouldn't you? Unless influential people are interfering in the investigation, of course. But he said a lot of things, Prince Andrew, in the interview, which looked like lies. And the fact that he was using legal language, instead of calling her a liar, he was saying, I don't remember her. And he obviously did, right? He obviously knows who she is, and I think it was plain enough. But you see, he can't call her a liar, because she will sue him. She's not able to sue people for the actual crimes because there's a statute of limitations in the USA and it has expired. So the thing is, you can traumatise people to such an extent that it takes them 20 years to recover their wherewithal and their inner strength of mind to be able to go after you, at which point they find that actually the statute of limitations has expired and they can't. It's kind of a get out of jail free card for people. But if you call her a liar, she can sue you under libel laws, especially in Britain, where the libel laws are insane, right? You need only the most peripheral connection with the UK in order to be able to sue. And it's tremendously expensive in the courts. Of course, Prince Andrew could afford it, but he doesn't want the royal family to be sued, right? Ghislaine Maxwell called her a liar in 2015 or so, and she was sued by Virginia Roberts, and it appears that she settled out of court in 2017. Some settlement was made, and it didn't end up in court. Probably a significant sum of money changed hands, but I don't know. So obviously the Prince doesn't want to be sued. He knows that Virginia Roberts will sue given an excuse. She wants her revenge, right? So his plea was, I don't remember her. He didn't say it didn't happen. Well, I think he did say it never happened, some other things, but it's... nobody believes him. I don't know of anybody that I've spoken to or heard talking about it that actually believes him. And his ability to lie is pretty poor. I mean, his childish attempts to look puzzled at some of the questions and accusations being made during the interview were just pathetic, really. Sorry, Andy, it's not credible. Right. He says that he wasn't able to sweat. She'd accused him of sweating a lot, or said he sweated a lot when he took her to Tramp nightclub and bought her a drink. He said he didn't know where the bar was. He's never bought a drink there. Pretty weak. Pretty weak, right. He said he wasn't able to sweat at the time because he'd had an adrenaline overdose whilst in the Falklands War. I don't know if that's true or not. Such medical testimony as I've heard casts doubt on that. One doctor said there's only 3 known causes of difficulty with sweating, and Prince Andrew had none of those. However, one can't be sure about medical things. I wouldn't hold that one against him as a lie, personally. But his argument of saying he wasn't at the Tramp Club that night was because he was home with his daughter Beatrice on that day, and that he took her to Pizza Hut in Woking, okay? And he remembers it because he doesn't go to Pizza Hut being a royal, right? He'll probably get his pizzas delivered or made in Italy and flown over, I don't know. But it has to be said that there are occasions when him and Fergie were both out and the kids were at home. That has been shown on the internet. And anyway, you go to a nightclub at night and you go to Pizza Hut in the afternoon. It's not the same time of day. And you have staff at home. You can leave the kids with them, nip out to the nightclub. Okay, go to the party at Pizza Hut, bring them home, go to the nightclub from 8 through to 2 a.m. or something, and there's no conflict there. It doesn't make sense. There are pictures of him sweating, actually, but or it may be just some other strange reflection of light. He said he's not a party person. That was the least credible of them all for me. I mean, back in the day, in the gutter press, he had the nickname Randy Andy. And that wasn't for no reason. He was always out. Okay. At least so it seemed. And there are plenty of pictures on the internet of him with women. He said there were no public displays of affection, but again, there are pictures of him hugging and so on. Completely not credible, that one. Maybe he thinks of himself differently. Maybe he's not very self-aware. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But because some of these rich and powerful people are some of the most backward psychologically that you can find on the planet. Yeah, not a party person. That's just ridiculous. I'm not a party person. He definitely was, at least when he was younger. And it also, I mean, I think it all went wrong for him actually when he dumped or was forced to get rid of Koo Stark. Remember, he used to go out with this porn model called Koo Stark. And I wonder if for all this subsequent scandal and whatnot is him psychologically trying to get back what he lost when he lost her. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of a sad outcome if so. But again, a lack of self-awareness on his part would facilitate such a process. I was looking through the papers, the court papers that Jane Doe's 1 to 4 have put in some of their cases. The cases have had to be dropped against Epstein, obviously, because he's gone one way or another. Committed suicide, suicided, whatever. And interestingly, in those papers it mentions, and it wasn't mentioned in the interview, and I haven't seen it mentioned in the media, of course, that they said that Prince Andrew was one of the people, along with Alan Dershowitz, Epstein's lawyer, who lobbied on Epstein's behalf to try and get him his plea deal in Florida, because he was accused of child rape down there, and it was eventually plea bargained to soliciting a 14-year-old child for prostitution, because apparently a child can be a prostitute somehow. Technically, I don't see how that's possible. It doesn't make sense. It's bad use of grammar anyway, because legally they're not allowed or not considered able to give consent. So how can they be prostitutes? It can only be rape. But anyway, that's what it was, and that's how it turned out. But interestingly, the accusers say that Prince Andrew was assisting Epstein in obtaining that. That has not been mentioned in the interviews. But it's in the papers. Not the newspapers, the legal papers. Alan Dershowitz, his Epstein's defence lawyer, is also accused of abuse and all the rest of it, and says he can prove it's false. Now, when this story first came out, not very long ago, 2 or 3 months ago, something like that it was, when it all started to break, one thing I noticed very quickly was the royal family and all the media running interference on the story. Is what it looked like to me. Because right away we started getting stories in the basement press about troubles in Harry and Meghan's marriage, or about how her wokeness is causing rifts in the family and all this garbage, right? They were trying to cover it up, basically, by distraction, I think. Because those stories have kind of faded away now that it's too late, and the story didn't go away. But these days I think the public are kind of much more awake, and this is why the powers that be are trying to crush services like YouTube, where independent people who can think can speak, because of course the mainstream media's purpose or job really is to keep us all asleep so that the elite can go on fleecing us without interference. And it's getting more and more difficult, and scandals like this are coming up which should have been hushed up. And speaking of that, one has to wonder, how come Epstein ever got caught? With so many powerful people under his thumb, he would have had, as the elite do, early warning systems all over the place. Moles in the FBI and elsewhere being blackmailed and forced to let him know, or just being paid a lot and forced to let him know if there's an investigation going on or if anything's going to happen. Normally these people flee before they get fingered, and instead he was caught. How is that possible? Over here, when there are investigations into top people, they get squashed. You get orders from on high, the police get moved to another department, the policemen investigating, the detectives investigating, or they just get straight order to leave it, to drop it. There are people on the internet telling stories of such things, and you hear about it surprisingly often, actually. Or with the Westminster child abuse scandal, which started to blow up, they managed to push in a non-credible witness and discredit him, and thereby discredit the entire thing. But there are still plenty of people around who know the truth, but it's not being investigated properly. This is how it works for now. It's a function really of how many people are managing to wake up versus how many can be kept asleep, really. When you look in Epstein's little black book, which is, some of it is available online, the famous names, I mean, obviously they're all over it. I mean, for Britain there's Tony Blair, Peter Mandelson, others. Peter Mandelson always came across as a slimy character to me anyway. But of course, just because somebody's in the book doesn't mean they were up to anything necessarily. They might have been prospective clients of his rather than actual clients, ones that he was hoping to get in touch with. I think in the case of Peter Mandelson, though, he has something like 13 phone numbers for him, and of his personal homes and all the rest of it. So it seems pretty thorough. Donald Trump is in it, of course, though I think it's generally agreed that Trump broke contact with Epstein very early on. It certainly looks like he thought that Epstein was not the kind of person to associate with. Clinton, on the other hand, did no such thing. Virginia Roberts used to work in Mar-a-Lago and was recruited by Epstein or Maxwell while she worked there as a child, 15-year-old, I think, at the time. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Epstein was directly associated with Trump and had his permission to be doing anything of the sort, or that Trump knew anything about it. I was just thinking about how come Epstein could have been caught, and could it be that Trump, as he was coming up through the ranks of the elite as an outsider, which he still is, but he's self-financed, unlike the rest who have to take donations. Donations to be president, that is. His promise to drain the swamp might have been made with some of the people he's met in the past in mind, although we know he had mafia connections himself. But could it be that the orders that normally come down from on top to block investigations were themselves blocked? Is he, in fact, perhaps starting to actually drain the swamp? I don't know. I'm in no position to tell. But it's strange that one of these people could be caught, because these people are historically pretty much immune unless they make enemies of the wrong people at the wrong time. And of course, if you're blackmailing a lot of people, they are enemies of you, but they also are under your thumb. Another thing about the palace, ABC had the story 3 years previously, according to Amy Robach, on that. I don't know if you've seen it. There's a leaked video of her talking about it after a news show, when she thought she was not live, and she wasn't, but everything was switched on. It wasn't being broadcast, but it was being recorded, and somebody leaked it. And 3 years previously they had the story about Epstein. They had the info on Clinton. They had witnesses. They had corroboration. So they really had the goods. And the story was killed because pressure from Buckingham Palace caused the management to fear they would not be able to get stories about Kate and William. Now, I don't know if the palace pressured them or if it was just the management on their own, but I've heard it said that the palace provided pressure. The palace being Buckingham Palace. So somebody thought it was better to allow the abuse of children to continue indefinitely, rather than not have the occasional stupid story about Kate and William. The palace, the management. Amy Robach herself didn't seem to care about that. She was concerned about being scooped, really, but I'm afraid that's modern journalism for you. It makes you kind of cynical, I suspect. And this interference, which they run, threatening to withhold stories, pushing other stories to distract you, isn't really working as well as it used to, is it? The fact this story is around, for a start. But also, I link it to the riots that are going on around the world, in various cities. I mean, over the last few months we've had riots, something like a dozen places. Quito in Ecuador, Colombia, Lebanon, Iran, Barcelona. There have been riots in Paris and protests in Paris every weekend anyway. Hong Kong, of course. They're all linked actually by a common theme, which is that people are fed up with being oppressed and ripped off by elites, be that the Chinese Communist Party or the money-grabbing corporate corrupt bosses of the world, of the West. Pretty much all of these riots are relating to the powers that be misgoverning largely to do with money. In the case of Barcelona, it's about independence. It kind of is in Hong Kong too, but also they are all being ripped off by elites. And Spain wants to carry on ruling Catalonia and all that for no good reason, just because the Queen married some guy from there in the past. And against the expressed will of the people, because they held an illegal referendum and the vote for independence passed in Catalonia. But anyway, in Latin America, it's austerity measures have been imposed by the IMF, and it's the usual West sucking money out of these countries. And it goes into our illegal offshore, or should be illegal offshore, secretive money havens, where it does no good for the people. And a few rich, corrupt leaders who have no loyalty to anybody except themselves and their own families want to keep it all, whilst people starve around them. And we have our own elite in Britain who are not quite so bad yet, who would be, but who are in fact ripping off the rest of the world, continuing to do so, as ever. And the monarchy, of course, are the elite of the elite. But people are gradually becoming immune to this mainstream media propaganda and not mentioning things which are actually relevant. The lie by omission is the most difficult one to detect, because you have to remember things. And of course, if you're half asleep, you can't. Right. So we have a succession of crazy story, crazy story, crazy story, insane, terror, terror, terror. And you become inured to it. When it's constant change like that, you learn the lesson subconsciously that none of it matters. And you stop paying proper attention to it. And then they can get away with everything. It's kind of the way that school works. They ring a bell every 90 minutes or something, and whatever you're doing, you drop it and you go on to something else. You gradually learn the lesson that none of this is important, because you drop it arbitrarily, no matter how important it might seem to you at the time. It's not. On to the next thing, which is also not important, etc. And the media also not mentioning that this is not the first time that the royal family have been linked to prolific paedophiles. Both Jeffrey Epstein and Jimmy Savile are among the most prolific paedophiles that have been known in all of human history, with the possible exception of Gilles de Rais, although he was probably framed. He was a knight that fought alongside Joan of Arc. But the case against him, although it was proven at the time, is not credible historically, because the person who was prosecuting him stood to inherit all of his lands if he could get him executed, which he did. So, maybe not. However, Jimmy Savile, of course, had the free run of Buckingham Palace for something like 20 years, and is now known to be a procurer of underage people for the rich and famous, like Epstein. We don't know if Jimmy Savile was doing any blackmailing. I've not heard anything about that, so he probably wasn't. He was introduced to the royal family by Lord Mountbatten, who is considered to have been a paedophile too. Now, Mountbatten was Prince Charles's mentor, at least. Lord Mountbatten changed his name from Battenberg, I think, way back in the day, when the Windsors changed their name to Windsor from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, because they're all Germans. But it didn't go well with World War One, you know. So they chose an English-sounding name, Mountbatten. Pretty good. That's a good name, actually. I mean, they knew their public relations. Windsor as well. Good name. But Jimmy Savile, a major paedophile and necrophiliac, had the run of the palace, could come and go as he pleased. All the security, the royal police, MI5, they must have known about him. And they must have known about Epstein as well, because they know everything about anybody who has anything to do with the royals, okay? And anyway, Ghislaine Maxwell has a clear line of linking to Mossad. So, is it just a coincidence that so many paedophiles are linked with the royal family? I can't say, can I? I don't know. But you have to wonder. What are they up to? Are they controlling it all? Or are they being controlled? Is somebody trying to bring down the monarchy? Or are these revelations accidental? Now, monarchy is an absolutely, I don't know what the word is, insane system of government. Why should someone be the ruler or the sovereign of a nation just because they happen to belong to the right family? I mean, what could be more racist than that? Seriously. It's ridiculous. Just belonging to a particular family means somehow you are the owner of a nation, effectively. It literally does belong to her. Along with Canada, Australia, etc., etc., etc. The Commonwealth countries have her as head of state too. But monarchy has one advantage. I mean, they say she has no power, but that's not true. Because the government all defer to her. And she has squashed bills. She squashed one not long ago, where there were tax changes which would not have been favourable to her, and she refused to give it assent. They had to change it. There was no scandal about it. Nobody said anything. It was Tories, you see. But she does have power. The army swear allegiance to her. And so do the police, who are not prosecuting Prince Andrew, you note, although he probably didn't do anything illegal in this country. at least with Virginia Roberts. One advantage a monarchy has over a presidential system is it keeps absolute power out of the hands of a politician. Sovereign power, if you like. And maybe that's a good thing. It's certainly a good thing when there's widespread corruption in a system, and open corruption in a system, like, I don't know, in Russia, for example, which obviously spreads down from the top through the whole population, because if the money for the services is being robbed, the people running those services have to start charging their customers to get things done, otherwise it can't be paid for. So money is sucked up through the system and funneled abroad into their private bank accounts. But corruption starts at the top, and Britain is considered to be one of the least corrupt countries in the world, but it depends how you count it, because it's our private banking subsidiaries in Jersey and the Cayman Islands and Panama and on and on and on that are actually assisting these elites to suck the money from the poor and take it away from them throughout the world, and which are leading to more and more riots in these cities around the world, because people are not so much asleep anymore. Can they destroy YouTube? Can they get a tight grip on the internet? Stop us talking? Let's hope not, eh? Bye for now.